we want to talk for around 40 minutes about the topic that we announced, about radical sounds and the commune of the dance floor. And then we want to discuss with you. We should start by introducing ourselves. Bianca, what are you doing? You're a scientist, cultural studies, working about sound. Tell us more.
I mean, for one thing, I have been doing a radio show for 15 years. At the beginning it was a hip-hop show, and then it sort of evolved. More and more electronic stuff came in, and then it was sort of on the edge, and now it became more electronic because I'm doing my PhD about festivals around electronic music. But it's not about the fusion or stuff like this. It's more like avant-garde festivals, something like CTM or Ars Electronica, those kind of festivals that have a bit also media art on the fringes of the new media art scene. So it's a lot of recently of this experimental electronic music, but I also teach popular music, so to say, and I have been teaching also about club culture a lot, and it's very interesting for me also because I have a critical approach towards it, but also of course I treasure it for different reasons. So yeah, there's this two sides to it which will also come into our discussion today. Yeah, Lukas, maybe you want to tell us about yourself. You do this blog for quite a while, which also has a critical approach towards club culture. And yeah, you also study art history, so just finished your PhD. Okay, so maybe say something about your blog and initiative.
Okay, I will not tell you about my PhD because it's something not relevant for here. So this I do during the day. What I do at night is I try to do some kind of science about raves. So with some friends, I developed a rave theory. It's called Shituationism. I mean, you're probably familiar with Situationists. Who has heard of the Situationists here? Good. This half has heard of it. So the Situationists were like a Marxist anarchist group in the 60s, in the May 68 in Paris, developing theory about the modern world and how everything is turning into images and how you have to reclaim the adventure of a real life against capitalism, basically. So when I was a big fan of this, and my friends, we were big fans of this, but then we thought, okay, in neoliberal times, what use is in seeking adventure? I mean, the whole society is about have an adventure, make a big trip, spend some money. So what we propose instead, and this is what sums up Shituationism, is you should aim at being boring. Yeah. So the Situationists, they claimed search the big adventure in your life. We are the Shituationists, and we claim find the boredom, find like the soft stuff, just surf this world on the surface. Okay, that's our theory, and we will tell you more about this. That's just as an introduction, and it's just some friends all over Europe, and we exist since 10 years, and we're just bloggers, okay? So you have been warned. Okay.
It's my turn to ask the first question. What we do, we want to do sort of a dialogue about what we think, thinking loud, and then this is sort of for you to pick up some topics we can discuss later on. So at the 9th anniversary of your blog, of your institute, you wrote a text and you wrote, "It is an ultra-negative think tank and dance formation. Our central concern is the rave continuum and how its potential survive in contemporary club scenes and irregular events." What does this mean exactly? And then you also talk about the crisis of rave. So what is to you the crisis of rave? Why is it ultra negative?
Okay, so the idea of situationism, the idea of situationism is the world is shit, so you can do more shit on the shit, so you don't take yourself too serious. And this this what you were quoting from, it's a birthday speech of the Shituationist Institute. So it was part of a performance, and it sounds a bit ridiculous as a quote, but actually what was happening on the birthday is I was wearing like glasses like this, and some kind of Berghain harness, and I was having the speech, and that makes sense to say, okay, we are an ultra-negative think tank, and we are a dance formation. This sums up what we are about. So the question about what we are concerned with, and this is, I think, also why I wanted to do this this panel with you is we talk a lot about reclaiming club culture or politicizing club culture, and what I would like to speak about, or what Shituationism is about, is what are we interested in raves? Like, why do we think that it's good that people go into a really dark room with really loud music, and they have a specific form of being together and a specific form of respecting each other or mistreating each other? So I would like to know what is really the heritage of this rave culture that we talk a lot about. Everybody's talking about the 90s and that we have lost a really radical rave culture. Okay, I get this, but what exactly have we lost, and what do we want to save? No, I want to ask you, so what do you think about this talking about the 90s and about the old utopia of raves? So what is the heritage of rave in your view?
Well, you really skipped my question, what's the crisis of rave, but maybe we get later into it. Well, I mean, I can tell you something, what people have written, for example, in more in-depth studies about rave culture, and there is a lot actually about England, because that's where it actually started and got big. And I think when we go back to this time, we can definitely say that the heritage is also a protest, because there was the Technivals and the free wave. It was a reaction, and the whole club culture, I would say, also against Thatcherism and what happened. Maybe we can call it a political crisis. And but through the Technivals, the people got really politicized in England, because they were criminalized by the Criminal Justice Act, and really had to fight for their right, literally, to party. So there we already see one thing, one element of the heritage, which is a right to demonstrate, for manifestations, for freedom of speech. So that's a big aspect, I would say. And another element, or it's also something we got from this time, or from club culture in general, is this sexual freedom, or to have a freedom of identities, that we can, at least in the club, choose to be somebody. We have the right to be queer, we have the right to be homosexual, to like whoever we want, free love, so to say. And even though this now entered the mainstream, this is something which was, at least when we talk about club culture, something that club culture pushed, and I think even pushed into the mainstream. Of course, they were not the only ones, but from having this temporary places where this was already accepted and, so to say, one of the unspoken rules, this is something we largely benefited from. And we can also Ania said this in the last panel, that we cannot take it for granted, because if we see what is happening now, this whole push towards the right, if we look at Poland or Hungary, or even if you come from, I don't know, small villages in Germany, I think you will notice that it's something really precious we have to take care of. And another thing which is super important for me is, and this is also a large topic in my PhD, it's about cultural work and precarious working conditions, and how do we work in this realm? We can say that the right to party, if you want to party every day, or at least not only on the weekend, then it definitely includes at least that you have this issue of other working conditions, working less time, getting better paid, so you can work less and survive. So this is something really important for me, and I think this definitely got lost. Something got wrong. This is for me a major issue, because now that free time and work mixes up totally, and people tend to do their networking in the club, this whole conditions got really precarious, that we only work with short-term contracts in the whole creative realm. And so this affects a lot of people that actually like to go clubbing, even though we did this to actually, we didn't only want to say, oh no, we don't come at 8, we come at 9. We also want to work less and get better paid. And maybe this is true for some people who work in advertisement or with computers or in startups. But largely for people who work in culture, it's definitely not true. Also not at academia, in the whole low-wage sector and so forth. So for the start, maybe this were 4 or 5 things we fought for.
So about the other question, about the crisis. Thanks. So first I wanted to say one text that I like about the crisis of rave is Katja Diefenbach's text from 1996, the Techno subject in the leisure jail, das Techno-Subjekt im Freizeitknast. And there she says that both the context and the content of techno have been marginalized in the historical integration of techno in entertainment culture. So progressive sound aesthetics, progressive psychoacoustic euphoria, the principle of the club, the switching of the position of producers and consumers, the linking of the human and the machine, the decentering of the subject, and then we are just left with the sign of techno. So we have cyberspace aesthetics, the club wear, the electronic sound and light spaces, the intoxication and ecstasy under the, as she says, under the lead of instant pop and leisure industry. I mean, so there's all this promise of techno that you are in the club with the machine, and it doesn't matter if you're in the audience or if you're the DJ, you don't even see the DJ DJing. But all this is, it's not really pushed to its limits. It's just another form of entertainment in capitalism. So this is one thing about the crisis, that all these promises of techno have not been fulfilled. One more thing. So what I want to say, I don't know if there are like members or fans of the Hedonist International here. I think so. Yeah, I guess some, maybe. So what my as a situationist, I would say that then hedonism really has a dilemma, because all this club culture and having fun and really feeling amazing is now a product of capitalism, and then to base a whole political group on this, we want to have fun and politics should be fun. Well, I don't see the radical point in this. I think there's too much fun in this world, so we should be like a bit serious about raves. And I think what I want to have from raves is boredom, sensitivity, communality, radical sounds. I don't want to have fun.
What about laziness? Is this also something you could go for? Yes? Laziness is okay?
I think laziness is a strange term, because it's centered around work, so I would rather ask what is work. If we go to a dance party, we work on ourselves, so we're not lazy. I think it's better to be lazy in the club, yes.
I wanted to add 2 things. Of course, something which is which was also gained through club culture is the right to, das Recht auf Rausch, the right to take drugs. What is this Rausch? The right to trip out. No, I mean, this is got quite accepted. Another thing which is not existing anymore and actually got lost is what was super interesting for me about electronic music in the beginning was this neglecting of stardom or being against stars, what you were mentioning with the hierarchies, that you try to get rid of hierarchies in the club, that somehow the barkeeper, the DJ and the person on the dance floor is the same, which is, I think this is something we completely lost on the way somehow. Because there are huge stars. If we look at EDM festivals or raves, David Guetta or whoever, it's like huge stars. And I mean, even in smaller clubs, you also have those stars. But
but still, in one of your texts, you were writing that rave and club culture is basically the last utopia in pop music, something like this. Okay, maybe we have lost the radicality of it, that everybody in the club is the same, but really what is about this utopia? Why is it the last utopia in pop?
I basically already answered this in the sense that I'm quoting also other authors or artists, and this was basically referred to the 90s club culture in England. Well, I mean, we had the Criminal Justice Act, and the interesting thing was that when electronic music came, that it was something, it's hard to imagine today, but it was something completely new against all the paradigms of rock and the music that we heard before. It was just also a mental and physical experience you didn't have before. I mean, how music is constructed, what rules, why do you like it? It goes against a whole history of music. And this was something not only mentally but also physical on the dance floor. You experienced something completely new. And also there was a lot of politicizing has been happening due to all those things I already mentioned, and because the people were criminalized. So a lot of people thought, okay, now we are really here. If you read what artists said at this time, it's like, oh my God, we are part of something big, something huge is gonna happen, things gonna change, society is gonna get completely different, we're gonna build a whole alternative to the existing system, so to say, but with totally other means. I mean, while in the 60s, for example, or even 80s, you talked also about subcultures and countercultures for a reason, because it's a different construct. What today we would say it's scenes, because it's much more loose and fluid, and this is negative in a sense also what's connected to community, but it's also positive in a way that you didn't need commitment as much as before, and you didn't have to say, okay, I'm this and that, whatever your subculture was for life. You maybe only be in it for 10 years or whatever. But yeah, so I don't know. We have this more fluid communities, and in those countercultures or subcultures, there were also this, counterculture, the word already says we are against something. I'm not saying that rave is not against something, but the freedom of rave was to say, okay, we don't have this burden anymore that we need to change something in the way that other generations before us did it, and it also didn't work out. I mean, this was sort of a bit a tendency to say, let's try something else, and you didn't know what this else could be, but you had a vague idea.
Okay, cool. And what is left of this utopia? Like, people that go to clubs today, they don't seem to be that radical, maybe? So what is left of these utopias of the past?
I don't know. I crossed that question out. Oh. I mean, to me, I have to say I'm not, but also in the 90s when it started in Germany, I was not so fond of clubbing, I have to say. I came from a totally different scene, listening to hardcore and death metal and things like this, and but of course also the Beastie Boys and other things, also some electronic stuff, Kraftwerk, but it was much more, okay, what are they doing at those Goa parties? In Hamburg, where I come from, there was basically Goa parties in the beginning. So I don't know, this was super Yeah, it was superficial, a bit superficial, but that's what you like actually about raves. So I was more interested in the music. For me, the music was much more interesting that happened than what happened in those communities actually, because I really doubted that they are real communities. But you think this is good, the superficiality. This is a recipe of the Institute.
Was this a question? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I could explain why I think that the community of the superficial people is a good thing. Yeah. Okay. So what I like about raves is that I still, after all these changes, that we are not a cool group that really respects each other and where the work of each one in the club is really valued, this is gone maybe. And it's not a proletarian radical culture like in the 90s, where young people were raving in the factories they had been fired from. So maybe that's lost. But still, what I find super fascinating about raves is that for me they are, or for us, they are a collective artwork. Like you enter this zone of a club, and you're part of this basic situation of one big dark room full of people moves to the same music and tries to relate to each other over long periods of time. And what I find fascinating about this is that the use value of this situation is really produced by the people. They move in the space for 20 hours. They stay there. The clock doesn't matter anymore. In the space doesn't matter anymore. Just this situation that is produced together, like a raving mob. Okay, not a mob, maybe like a raving crowd, a raving mass. Yeah, a mass of people where you really can. Some people talk about losing yourself in music, and what I find really fascinating about raves is that you lose yourself in other people. So this is, for me, is really fascinating, that you tend to forget where you are, you're really exhausted, and then suddenly you start to build up a different kind of connection to the people around you, but it is really superficial because it's really dark and it's super loud. So you have to negotiate your needs or what you want from each other on a completely different level. You really have to, I mean, if you're cool, you have to look at the other people, what they want from you, and have to find out really on a micro level to not annoy anybody. And really there's this mass of people that does this for 20 hours. I think that's really futuristic and radical. So for me that's an amazing kind of way to do art, to process this. And then I think when I would say what is to reclaim about this is that in many cases it doesn't work like that. In many cases, there is violence, there's rape, there's disrespect of each other, there's stupid things are happening, bad things are happening. So what I think my politics about this would be to talk about this other rave that we want and that is so amazing, and then we have to defend this. Then we have to talk about how is consent established in a really dark room where it's really loud, for example. And what I also like about the term superficial, because you said the raves were so superficial. I mean, I love situations where everything is superficial because that's a good way to treat each other as first there's like something between us. It's not like I can't like just enter you and see what's inside. I just have to respect you as a surface. And what I like about raves is that people are really, I don't know, seeing each other as surfaces. Everything turns into a surface. So for me, a rave is an interface. Okay. I have two questions. I have to decide which one is good now. So I wanted to ask you, you also investigate raves, but maybe different than I do. So I wanted to bring up the question, how can we do even like a science of raves? Like how do you think it's good to investigate raves or club culture? I mean, so I was describing that the people are really tripping and finding each other in the dark, and then there's like a cultural studies investigator analyzing them. So people maybe don't like this. So I want to bring up the question, what is the science of rave to you as a professional?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this before, so I think it's good to do everything. I mean, as an anthropologist, there is this participation. You don't only observe, you participate, and as close as possible. And usually it ends in something like going native, which you don't want in anthropology. You don't want the researcher to go native. But I'm saying I think it's good. If you want to do good research, you should go native. But maybe if you decide to write it down, you have to let go, at least for writing it down, because otherwise it will be difficult. So participation is a good thing. That's why I think that people who are already inside of something can do good research and better research than people who come from outside. I mean, but even though there have been good studies from people which have more the view from outside, this can be good for something as well, because things that people take for granted, especially practices or language or gestures, it's much more clearer for the person from outside, or the person really tries to figure out why are they doing this. And you would not even think you are doing something which is specially connected to club culture or rave if you are inside of it, because it's so natural for you. So I don't know, there are those different ways. The wrong way is definitely just to read about it. But with the internet, a lot of things changed. I mean, you can see lots of videos on the internet. You can see concerts. You can read loads of interviews. I mean, things you had to search. I mean, when I was traveling before, I tried to bring music and written documents from several countries, fanzines, because how do you get the information? I mean, you need to go there. And now this is not really necessary anymore. I mean, can be helpful as well to get more deep, but there is so much available on the internet which you can analyze already, or very interesting also threads from blogs where people discuss about songs or labels or events or concerts. So there is loads of material you can research, and yeah, I guess it should be always a mixture. Not only theory, but theory. The good thing is that you, what I'm trying to do as an anthropologist, I read, of course, a lot of theory. What are people writing from different countries? At least if I speak the language or it's translated. But I also speak to people, and I think speaking to people is the most important thing. And the easiest way to speak to people is when you are already in the scene. Otherwise, you have to gain their trust, maybe for a long time, that they will speak openly with you about it. Does this somehow answer the question? But dancing is super important, because now we come maybe to another topic, which is the sound of the music itself. And this is so fascinating for me. I mean, for me, music is really, that's what always hooked me to clubs. Also because at home you just have your little stereo, and even if it's good, you turn it up loud, then your neighbors come and the police. So for some sort of music, especially this sort of club music, you really want the full experience with a good sound system and really loud. So that's why I go to clubs nonetheless. And yeah, I think the sound also brings in something special. You already mentioned something. I would describe it as to get lost and to let go. And Jochen Bons, he also wrote this interesting book about Subjekte des Tracks. It's subjects of the track. I mean, it was more like a collage of different, but he researched house music basically through literature, through clubbing, through artists, interviews, and so. But he made this theory that being in the club has this this tension between getting lost on the one side, but also getting related to other people, to even objects, to the music. And even though I would say this getting lost is fixed a lot on the music and getting related to the people, because for a lot of people it's super important that they don't have this experience alone but with others. And for me, I really like this, to let myself go in the music. And I mean, rave is really this, it's professional, it's done to the fullest, I would say, because the night is extended. It doesn't last only 5 hours anymore, it lasts 10 or 15 or 20 hours to get the maximum out of it. And then also the whole space has become so professional. I mean, all the people who are in reclaimed club culture and have their clubs, they know it. I mean, it's not only about sound, it's also about light. It's you have this multi-sensoric atmosphere. So the music does one thing, and then the rest does something else to get to drag you more into this. And drugs, of course, also are used to trigger this even more. But both, the getting lost and the getting related. So now you have to say something about the getting related.
So you were talking about sounds, and we named this sound Radicality and club Communality. Yeah. So maybe it's time to talk a bit more about the radical sounds. You started about this, and it's connected to the being lost and being connected. Okay. Because what I wanted to say is, a lot of the theories about the radicality of the rave sound, about how radical rave sounds are, and I mean, I have something here. It's Achim Szepansky's new book. Basically, he's explaining how raves is hyper-capitalist and really radical at the same time. It's called The Ultra Black of Music. And there's another book by Kodru Eshun, The More Brilliant Than the Sun. It's from the 90s. It's a classic of explaining the sonic fictions of raves, basically, also. And what's irritating for me, and I will come to your question, what's irritating for me about these texts is that very often it's about, they relate the sound to the drugs that people are taking. So it's very easy to explain hip-hop through smoking weed. So, I mean, you get it, you have the beat and you just bump the head, and so it's a weed smoking attitude. And then there's the invention of funk, which is basically an acid culture. So you take LSD and there's a flow. There's not, like, there's a groove, there's funk is in the music. So this is done by rave theorists, and then they can explain dubstep through ketamine and so on. So you get what it's about. And for me it's really irritating, because for me a club is more about how to relate to each other under any substance. It doesn't matter if you drink lemonade or drink beer or whatever. And so I would say what I see today is not like a ketamine culture or an acid culture or an acid music or ketamine music, but what I see in the club is an art form for our way of relating to the digital world. What I see in a club is basically not drug users, but screen users. So everybody is in the club is utilizing the world like he or she is used to browse and surf the endless digital worlds. So you just get lost in this thing. There's like an endless flow of input, output, and you just stay on the surface. So for me, it's a very much related to the surfer attitude, and I'm a total fan of this, so I'm propagating it, of course, a bit. So for me, it's not something that you should explain of the state of mind the people are having in this special moments, smoking a joint, but the way they have developed in the last decades of relating to the world, to the world as an image. So I don't think they are really lost. I think they are getting into a kind of flow, and it's very much related to the superficiality that we have trained each other. So it's a surfer attitude.
Can I ask a question? I just want to make sure I understood. Did you say we can analyze club culture without taking into account drug use and different drugs use, basically?
So what I don't like about the history of rave as it is done in these texts that really related to different periods and different drugs is, for me, the principle of a rave to be in a kind of dark environment with a lot of people and feeling really social, and it's a loud drum and there's like flickering lights. I mean, this is one of the oldest cultural techniques that human beings have produced. Like I mean, I'm no specialist on this, but I think for long periods of time, people have been dancing around fires, relating to each other in the night.
Yes or no?
Yes or no? But it's not yes or no. I mean, I love these books. I'm just offering a different view, and I'm saying if we are really interested in what to save about raves, we should also think more about how the humans in raves relate to each other, because that is fascinating for me. I mean, I don't know about some of these music producers, for example. They didn't like at all to be described as ketamine musicians. So it is a problematic way to tell a story in itself. So I would say maybe no.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we would also just open it up in 2 minutes or so, just to finalize this and then talk with all of you. I mean, for me, I just wanted to mention two things. One thing is because you mentioned Shituationist, and there we maybe come back to something which is problematic, because to say Shituationist is just about sonic fiction. No, it's not just some sonic fiction. It's about the history of black people in music, and this is the Black Atlantic is this theory that actually says that the blacks have been enslaved and repressed, but their sort of revenge was music spreading all over the world as a virus through hip-hop, through Detroit techno, through, I don't know, all the different styles, jungle you want to mention, where blacks, people of color have been involved. So this is super important, and I think this is also one thing we should take into consideration when we talk about club culture, because usually, or most club culture, at least in Berlin, I can say, or whatever I experienced, is white middle class people. And I mean, there is this openness definitely within club culture, and it's a potential, but it does not get fulfilled so much. You can say, yeah, the door is open, just step in. But if you want to have some people in or make club culture more diverse, you maybe have to do different things.
I mean, thanks. Okay, of course, it's like about masculinity and violence in the rave situation. So I was wondering, rave music is a kind of it's a really hard music. Sometimes it's really dark. So is it inherently like, I mean, I have the question in German, sind Raves ein Macker-Ding? So how to translate this? Is it a macho thing? So inherently, like this kind of culture, this strong music, strong people, we can dance for 24 hours, we are so hard and strong. So this would be my question. I mean, you mentioned that there are problems, and so two questions, and then we let you talk. Sorry, we're talking for so long. The two questions would be, is it a macho thing from the style of it? I mean, you have been researching also dark, aggressive music like Gabba. And secondly, is my way of talking about it, like it's just a mass of people in the dark. Is it really ignorant of this thing? So tell me, what would be like, how to problematize this?
I mean, all those people who write critically about club culture, they definitely mention this topic. It's also nothing new. It happened for a long time. I mean, many or some of you might know about this whole, this issue really got public when Female Pressure started this facts counting, and it was a little bit of a drama when people noticed, oh wow, we have all those ideals, everybody is the same, we are so diverse. And then there were some countings and statistics that turned out, no, it's not diverse at all. I mean, female pressure looked in the first counting on labels, on radio stations, different party series, but they continued with this for the last 7 years. Super interesting was also that this on a very good festival, We Make Waves, which happened in Berlin for the first time this autumn, also focusing on queer and trans musicians and activists. And last but not least, so I want to make this shorter because I want to talk with you. I could go on and on about this topic, but let's just say, yes, it's still a problem. We need more diversity. We need more gender sensitivity and more visibility for women. But another problem I find is also when we talk about the historization of club culture, that there is this tendency, at least I can say it for Berlin and Germany, there has this tendency to really put even ideology and become a lot of ideology in it, and to be even nationalistic. I mean, I don't know who knows this book, The Sound of Family. It also, Der Klang der Familie, it also got translated into English. This myth about Berlin and about East and West coming together, and but at the same time we had all those refugee houses burning in Germany, and there was not a unity. The opposite was the case, and how we also know today from the NSU that this was the time when the nationalists, the Nazis, were radicalizing and organizing themselves, and there's a tendency when you talk about club culture, when you talk about the good old days, to really say, to not be aware of this at all. And this is something which really annoys me. And another thing which I also wrote about is the potential of gentrification, eventization, to commodify experience, and also a special sort of experience. How can we deal with this? So we talked enough now, I think, but Lukas, do you also have some final comments, some things you want to mention before we talk with everybody?
Well, my final point would be I'm very happy that we did this, because I mean, I have my way of doing ultra-negative rave theory, but I also like your negativity a lot, so thanks for this. So we want to open it up because, I mean, what do you think about these questions? For later, we also have a reader because we quoted some people, so we will have this lying around. It's English and German because it's different sources. Maybe we will upload it to the wiki, something like this. Okay, please ask questions, make proposals, criticize us and the rave.
Hi, Lucas. I've got a question regarding your theory about the surfer, how the culture now is with the surfer. Can you remember what I mean, the question you had about the surfer? I don't fully understand this theory. Could you expand more on what observations you've made to come to this theory, or any examples you have?
Yeah, maybe I can even add to this, because you also talked about this, you make the comparison to the internet a lot, and that there is the hope of the new generation now, the internet generation. So how are computers and the club culture, how are they linked?
So they're definitely linked on many, many different ways. The kind of, when we talk about bedroom producers, for example, that people live in the countryside somewhere at the end of the world and they become famous techno producers because the sound basically is public domain. So you just take a beat, remix it, publish it. So this is very digital about it. Then for me it's interesting that it's so highly digital, very futuristic, but still again about bodies. So this, like, because it's a very bodily situation. You switch off your phone, you switch off your computer, you go out to meet other people, you're getting really close with them. So I was thinking about this, why is this being so close to each other so popular amongst the digital generation? And obviously we could say it's escapism. They want to get away of you switch off the TVs, you switch off the computer, so you run away of your digital life. But I would put it on a different level to say it's 2017 still, and we still haven't become cyborgs, but we have become kind of digital human beings, and I think it affects the way that we relate to each other. And where I see this the most is in a club. This kind of attitude to the world that you have everything. I mean, music. This was the Napster experience for our generation. That for the first time you just log in and you take the music that you want, and you have all the music of the world. And so now people at the end of the world, they listen to rave sounds. I mean, they also listen to Britney Spears, but of course they also listen to rave sounds. So there is a global rhythm about this. So for me it's highly digital, and you have everything and you want everything, and then you decide to go into a club because it's the maximum of this experience. You are in the flow and you let go and you surf on the surface. I mean, I'm basically repeating myself, so it's a bad way to answer the question. But that's about it. There's not much behind it. I think we have started to really learn how to use interfaces better. Everybody, old people, young people, have learned how to relate to an interface, to superficial ways of organizing things, to click on stuff, to take stuff in. And I think the club is like this. You just get in. You don't want to. I don't think the people really want to get lost. They know exactly what they want. They want, at least I think, a lot of them want this kind of softness, sensitivity, easiness, that you really are just in the flow. And for me, this is a highly digital thing. Before, it was maybe the radio generation that was turning the knob of the radio.
I think that's a very interesting theory, but it doesn't hold because of, in the 90s, where techno and all this stuff was born, there were not so many interfaces around, and it was a similar thing, clubbing in this time. So I think it's a view taking a view from now on this, and it's an interesting approach. But I think lots of things are still the same than in the past. And the other thing, I came a bit late. I'm not sure if I got you right. Was about the white middle class thing. For me, techno and house is more a proletarian thing. When I came to the techno scene, it was a very, 80%, 90% proletarian, and it was, for me as a middle class person, a place where I really got to know other people who just said they are Fleischer ausgelernt, just like a butcher and whatever, people I haven't never met before, and this was something special about the culture. Yeah.
So I think you read this in books, but we did it. So it was a really different thing, and I don't agree with a lot of points of your approach because it wasn't that you are describing. So it's too much points, I could say, and and there is no rave music. The music. What is rave music? The same like what is independent music. It's not some special genre or kind of music. You need to know. The Happy Mondays have been rave musicians, as well as the Prodigy, and maybe a DJ like Paul Oakenfold, or as well Westman in Germany and other guys. So I think there's something wrong. You read. Maybe you should read a little bit more.
Yeah, but I think this is a very arrogant way of approaching it. I mean, also I didn't only read about it. I mean, I don't know what you refer to, but we are definitely here to get into contact, and also something which Lucas always says is that he wants this rubbing on the surface. So I think conflict is good and it's productive.
Maybe you're not wrong. You're not wrong from your point of view. But I think I have a different point of view, and this is not arrogant. It's I'm telling how it was. So, and we didn't think about. We just wanted to go out making music, having fun. We've been young and didn't think about what happened around at the moment. And also to say everybody consumed any drugs he could get, and everybody was happy. Or it was a different time. Maybe it's a bit difficult to read this scene and this in books. Maybe I'd like to say that.
No, cool. I mean, I'm not even old enough to be having been part of this. Of course, I'm completely wrong about it. But what I know is how it is now. I mean, I organize parties, I go to parties, I see young people who still go to raves, and I started to think, so why do they do this? I'm not saying in the 90s they didn't have, they were not the screen generation. I would say now, I know, but there's still a rave, and what I find so fascinating when I read the books about the utopias of the 90s, then I start to think why it's relevant today. So I think it's cool that you're aggressive or something, because I'm aggressive towards the hedonists, so the ravers are aggressive against the Shituationists. It's cool. It's good. I'm good with this.
I have actually two questions. I discovered something interesting. There are in France there are technivals and raves, very very different approaches, and it just happened that we stumbled in the middle of a forest in the Montagne Noire in a rave, into a rave, like actual rave, and it was very interesting because it was a lot more punk attitude. It was like they had, the DJ was hidden behind a wall, and they were really, it was really punk, and it was very technical, because it was really this, you could see people in front of the boxes. It was really back to the roots of the actual idea of electronic music, and also combined with punk might fits best. Even they had symbols, and it was very open. And the other question is regarding this point of connection, because in a way, is it a question like surface connection? And in a way, it's completely the opposite about being connected. In a way, this is this illusion about being connected, but at the same time, it feels so connected, but you're completely atomized. But you have this illusion about being connected, but you do not have a connection that lasts over the day, or you don't need that. But this won't last for anything, or it's so maybe or maybe not. And at the same time, I wonder where could this move forward? Because at the same time, I feel it's very honest. It's a surface way of we try to find new connections, right? And we do this in a gentle way. And I was wondering, is there a way forward? Like, I don't know, it just crossed my mind that could there be something like, and I thought we should try it out in terms of, if you combine contact improvisation and develop something like full contact techno or something, is there something like that? Or would that be possible? Is that maybe the stuff maybe we should try?
Yeah, so I'm interested if you had a view on the potential of raves and politics, and trying to politicize a young generation which is not going to marches any longer. And so in the past you had more like these raves on the street, like taking the streets and like making noise and stuff like that. Did you focus on that in your research too?
Yes, I do. I mean, the question that I ask in my research also, I mean, this is also already an outcome of the research, so to say. I mean, if you look at bigger festivals, I mean, at some of those festivals, 50,000 people come over 5 days or 10 days. So that's a lot of people. It would already be the place where you could take action. I mean, at least all the issues we sort of mentioned that are connected to club culture or electronic music or cultural work. But as I mentioned before, this was also to say that back in the days people wanted also to get rid of maybe, and to say, okay, we have to start something new. Also the old things, they didn't work out, and so maybe it has to be a mixture. I don't know, some sort of cultural hacking. I mean, I don't know yet how to fill this, but I really would to like hack club culture. I mean, not every scene or every community, because they are of course super diverse. I mean, but then there are some things in common which are typical about rave music, I would say. You have this repetitive beats, you have a loud bass, you have a good sound system and a certain setting where it happens. Lots of festivals also start to have some discourse programs, or even a lot of discourse. It was interesting because in the Wire number 400 a few months ago, the editor was writing, I'm really looking forward to festivals that don't have any discourse at all, where I can just dance and listen to music and don't need to think about it. But so this is a trend also to sort of intellectualize maybe rave or club culture, but at the same time I think it's important to talk about some things and to find solutions, and maybe just do action at the spot, make a mailing list or whatever.
I have some things. First, about the Shituationist, I was very curious because you said about taking less serious, going with the flow, and I have a question for you, which is, how do you do this? The other is, I think there is a bit of context in this whole, what is this rave scene or this club scene? Is it the white thing of the 90s that was born in Europe? And then when I look at it, when I see it, is for me nowadays it's basically the last resource of a white culture, a Western culture, to be ritualistic, to be in communion with people, but it's like also inside the very industrialized and capitalistic context, which I think is missing in this whole discussion, which is like, it is a white European thing. And we're not talking about it this is the beginning of this discussion for me. It's like, I feel it's missing a bit this part of...
I mean, yeah, thanks for bringing it up, because maybe it would be strange if I bring it up, because I don't know, I said that I think it's a global culture of dancing in the dark and so on, and maybe it's just romantic the way I describe it, definitely. So maybe you want to say something about it also, but I want to answer these kind of questions that from you and the others that were in the room, like how to talk politically about it, and so what it could mean, how we could be more radical and go, like really develop a concept from it, like have full contact techno, or how to mobilize the young generation. And it's for me also connected to your question of how do we go with the flow. So, I mean, I don't have a concept because I'm just a stupid situationist. I think rave is a really good concept, and I see rave as a training ground of behaving in like a mass of people that don't want to create a family, start a company, but they just want to enjoy each other. And I'm no specialist about how to organize yourself in the flow. I'm just seeing that there are mass events and people relate to each other, and I'm super fascinated by this. So I think it's a good thing. We shouldn't forget that still a lot of people think it's a bad thing to party a lot and to destroy yourself. And I don't think the people destroy themselves, but they really are in this kind of training ground for a different way to treat each other. So I don't want to, I mean, I don't have a club, so it's not even a question, but I don't want to change it. I mean, they're doing it fine. I think it's exciting what it brings up in ways of thinking. So this is for me rave science, to think about this, what kind of new way of thinking, of encountering people this brings up. So this is basically my answer to this question. So I think street raves are amazing to make a parade. It's amazing because you take this kind of secluded culture that is behind closed doors with a bouncer and so on, you take it in the streets and you irritate a lot of the daily life. So there is the rhythm of the daily life, like the clock and the commodity form and so on, and you bring a different kind of global rhythm in it. It's really good. And if there's fog and people are stumbling, really different things are starting to happen. So so how to go with the flow? I see a lot of people doing it and I'm just amazed. So I don't have a concept for this. And yeah.
I would like to say something which you said, and I think you are right in a sense that I mean, I don't think that it's only a Western concept, because of course there are raves in the favelas and at other sides of the world, and I think a lot of inspiration will come from there, because it's not so fixed yet. I mean, it's still developing in some parts of the world, and that's where the most exciting ideas come up, also from different backgrounds. And of course, in some cities or countries, it's just something which the upper class does. Other people can't go clubbing. I mean, they have some sort of events where they dance, of course, but not in a sense what we would understand as rave. But for me, also as an old hip-hop affiliated person, I would say there is a strong vibe that comes from the street, and where clubbing in different countries all over the world, non-Western countries, where it's starting to get bigger. And there it's definitely, and that's interesting, if we look at Lebanon or whatever, people still have to really fight hard for their right to do it at all. So I think there is more this political impetus, because people have to fight for it. Plus the music is super innovative in a sense, with other influences. So all those hybrid we now can listen to, which was more difficult before because we had to travel there, get records and so forth. So I think a lot of influence hopefully will come from there. And yeah.
And they can't really afford being superficial about it.
Just to say, like, I was very interested when I heard about this talk, and especially like all of us coming from Latin America, and Tanya also, like, I think, like, I don't know, like, it's for me, like, this discussion, and it's nothing personal, it's just the topic, like, it's just empty for me. And not because, like, I come from another context, because I live in Berlin for 3 years now, so I'm part of the culture scene now, not like since the 90s or whatever. But the thing is, like, maybe I read that, like, check your privilege in and out through, like, into the techno dance floor or whatever, you know. And then for me, I think what would be, like, a good way to, like, radicalizing this, like, not just in Berlin, but, like, among, like, white people. I'm assuming, but, like, I think there's a lot of white people here, and, like, talking to them, for me, would be, like, okay, like, let's start this talk talking about our privileges in the fucking techno club. Like, in the dance floor. It's okay with going with the flow. Like, I'm also like this. Like, whatever, fuck this. But then, like, sometimes I'm like, no. Like, harassments in clubs. Like, I'm part of a harassment teams. It's like, it's a fucked up situation. But, like, radical for me, it's like coming here and saying, like, hey, all of you that come on the dance floor, you know, like, if you identify as a cis man and white, look in the mirror. You are harassing people in a club. So, you know, and that's just not all men, I know, but, like, this is radical for me. It's like just looking, like, in the mirror and saying, like, okay, we all here like to rave since the 70s or 60s, or I don't know how old you are, but, like, me, you know, you're welcome. But then, like, for me, like, everyone likes to rave, and then, like, you've been to, like, contact improvisations, like, punk clubs in, like, the 90s or whatever in France. I'm, like, from the fucking, like, close to the favelas in São Paulo, and, like, everyone likes to party and to rave, but how are we making this radical? Like, how are we going with the flow? How are, you know, like, how are we making going with the flow radical or whatever, you know?
Yeah, I agree, and I think this was a talk, like, to talk about this white culture in a white way that's a bit like two white people, and it's a bit like 1 hour of talking about ourselves to ourselves. It's not radical, I think. You know, like, there's so much to be talked about club culture, and especially, like, we know about Berlin. That's what I know. I go to clubs. I love clubbing. I like what you said about. I identify with what you said of being in the club and the way you see the interactions and all. That's what I identify. That's why I go. But when I come to a talk about radicalizing that, I'm expecting, okay, let's check our privileges.
So, because I think what I want to say is, this is not our poster, okay? No, really, I didn't announce that I will talk about privilege in the club situation. So, first, this I didn't announce, so of course I didn't talk about it. I wanted to talk about why people think that sounds can be radical. So we talked about this, and just to defend first what we did, because you didn't like it, it's okay, but just to defend what we did. And the second thing about what kind of communality. No, sorry, I don't want to make you angry. I understand your point, and I just wanted to. Okay, cool. Okay, thanks for saying it. And the other thing, what I find fascinating is, I was saying that bad things are happening in clubs. I mean, I'm not stupid, so I know, and good things are happening in the club. And today, it's frustrating maybe for you, and I get it. So thanks for bringing it up. I was talking about what I want to say about clubbing. So, okay, it's maybe ignorant, and like I said, I'm super glad to have done this with Bianca, for example, because she brings up a totally different negativity. So I'm also thankful for this, because I'm just talking about how I see in a rave situation fragments of a commune. It's maybe super white, it's maybe Marxist Western stupidity or something, but that's what I promised, and that's what I talk about, and I'm thankful for your contribution, but I'm just saying this was my topic.
So here we have today slots and panels from Reclaim Club Culture, and they all have different topics. So the privilege thing was at 10 o'clock in the morning, no, 12 to 2? 12. And we had different topics, and the word radical is just connected to sound, sort of. I mean, we didn't talk so much about it, but this is something I'm super interested in. And when we talk about research, there is not much research about it. But I don't want to approach music like a musicologist and say, okay, here is the harmonies, here's the bass, now the sub-bass, and then here's a modulation, blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, people do it actually in musicology, and there can be some gain from it, but in general, I think for our topic it doesn't help so much. But still, I think that sounds in communities connected to sounds can be radical. And in general, maybe it's important to say that sounds can hurt you, or bass can be very immersive. In that way, of course, sound can hurt you and maybe is radical or aggressive, but that's not what I mean, because sounds are also anticipating something, or you anticipate with sound something, and this is maybe more connected to the flow. So what is the music doing to us? But it's not the music itself, it's what we put into it. So of course you put your cultural background and experience in it, and I put mine, and we cannot abstract to this. We can only try to be aware that there are so many different background sounds, because you and me, we will not hear the same sound. I mean, we will hear it differently. But this is super important also. If we want to politicize club culture, maybe we don't. I mean, some people don't. But I think it's time to maybe do this. How we do it, I don't know. But maybe you have some ideas, because you talked about being radical, and that this is not radical. So what would be radical for you, or what is in general radical for you connected to club culture?
Just I brought this topic of privilege and radicality in this way, because if you were talking about this sound radicality that you just mentioned now, I would be super interested, because I study sound, and for me it's nice. But you both of you touched lots of topics that are into the social aspect of clubbing, which is why I brought the whole privilege thing, because you talked about harassment and about and you also about like being nice and how people behave inside the club, and this for me, and also like about the history of raving and all this. So for me, that's why I couldn't, for me the whole time this talk was more about the social aspects than the sound aspects, and especially when we were talking about parties in Berlin, that's what I've been going through. I cannot not say how white it is and how not radical it is in this sense, and because I've been talking a lot about this with friends, which is it is the last resource of how we can be ritualistic with each other, like the people that are like us. Like that's where we go just to find this communion, which is also one of the topics. And I was also expecting a bit of And this is also actually the question I wanted to ask before, which is this need of when native people were dancing around the fire, playing drums and playing other instruments and singing and taking drugs, or doing like hallucinogenic, going to hallucinogenic states. We're still doing the same thing, but then now in this capitalistic world where you pay to get in, and you have like all these rules, all these things that you follow there. I don't know. This was also where I wanted to come with my first question.
So I would just say I found this point very important that you made about it being a kind of resort of ritualism, because that's it. But so what is? I would like to hear also what is problematic about it. Is it because of people being excluded and white people dancing together? So is this because the point about ritualism? It could be. I don't see where the statement goes. I think it's a good statement to make about this kind of club situation. So I would like to understand. So is it a problem or is it a good thing? Should we talk more about it?
Not a problem or a good thing. It was a more question of if you see this way as well. Yeah. The problem is the other part, which is that the context of where this talk was coming from, that I missed it in the beginning. Like if this was supposed to be implicit, that this is the rave culture that we are talking about is a white culture. This is the thing that I wanted to know. Is if this is was supposed to be implicit, because in my mind what comes also is like festivals. When we talk about festivals, also we went to South Africa once for a festival, and 90% of the crowd were white, and we were like. In South Africa, you go to a festival and most of the people were Europeans. I was like, what's going on here? And then now there is I know that there's a lot of people talking about people of color and white festivals and what's going on, like even in Fusion, that's supposed to be a radical festival or a left-wing blah, blah, blah festival. I don't know. But this topic, okay, I understand this is not a topic of this talk. But the other point of the question of the ritualism, because I think this comes also with where it comes from, like the whole rave culture or clubby culture or whatever.
No, we are here to learn about different perspectives also, so that's why it's good that you bring it up.
Thank you. I haven't been here for the whole time. I'm a discussion raver. So in my understanding, a rave is not necessarily connected to the techno or dancehall music, but for more or less the right of spontaneous intervention in free or in spaces, in public spaces. And I live in Leipzig, and it has a very strong raving culture in the sense that we just go into the forest or on rooftops or in the underground, and it's not a perfect sound that we have. It's mostly shitty, but nonetheless, it's more about the right to take room. And when I was traveling, to, I don't know, the Balkans, to the Middle East, to Africa, you have these situations that you just feel that you can't drop into communities because they have their languages and they have their cultural habits, and you're this white girl standing there, do not know how to behave. And as soon as the sound starts and people start their own rave ritual, meaning that they have, I don't know, their own private space or their garden or the street or a forest, you can connect. And I think this is the radical aspect of it, because radical meaning going to the roots. And the root is where we all can find a ground. And this is so easy. I'm always surprised how easy it is. Have you ever experienced a good protest without music that everybody feels euphoric about? Or have you ever experienced anything that was good without music? So music or sound itself, I think, is the radical part of it. And rave is maybe the white tag that we put on it, because techno was more or less a white culture. But when we talk about Goa or drum and bass, then we have to differ also, because there were also other influences. So, but I would, encourage you to use the word rave for much more than these white clubbing thing. And whenever you have to pay an entrance fee that is not based on voluntary offering, then it's not a rave.
I hope any one of you has heard of Carl Cox and Detroit Techno and Chicago House.
Yeah, I mean, of course we have underground resistance, we have Detroit and all this, but it's actually an interesting fight that goes on. Where did it start, or did it start at the same time there and here, so to say? But I guess there have been those. That's normal in history. People have the same ideas. I mean, it was before the internet. People, of course, traveled, but I guess there was this thing in the air that this music has to come up now. It was just a question of time where it happened. So, of course, when we talk about rave, this whole aspect of space is super important. That's why I also mentioned that there are those ambivalences which really, stress me. On the one time, there is this, which is also from a bit the squatting punk attitude. Yeah, we take rooms, let's take our space and party on the one hand, and on the other hand, you see in Berlin, and it's going to happen in Leipzig soon, I'm super sure, this whole gentrification processes, eventization, and how people have to leave their neighborhoods because clubbers from all over are coming, and they need hostels to stay, they need restaurants to eat, or they even come and move there, which is totally fine, but for them it's cheap. Leipzig will be super cheap like Berlin was, and then prices will raise. So there is this, how do you say, verstrickt, entanglement of topics, of freedoms and ambivalences at the same time, or of potentials and a sort of counterside that comes with it. And but it's a perfect example, and this is of course not only true when we talk about rave, but there are different routes also, and depending on what rave culture or maybe club culture we look at, there are different routes coming into it. And I think this black side, or this black Atlantic side, is super important to it. We couldn't have all those good music without it. Now I lost totally what I wanted to reply to, but for me it would be very important also to mention that Reclaim Club Culture today has taken this space and this day to also gain inspiration from you, because we want to find an agenda to what we want to do next year. Also, this sound topic is super interesting. For me, I think we lost this a bit because also we are not like super prepared coming from Christmas holidays and had to work a lot. But this is a very interesting topic to me, and but we have to be aware of, and when you work with sound, you know that sound is not only pure sound; it's always social and cultural in a way. So I think it's important to look at both. I mean, this is, for example, the newest book, or one of the newest books from 2016, Low End Theory, Bass, Bodies, and the Materiality of Sonic Experience. He criticizes a lot what has been written so far, but I find his book just as abstract, so to say, actually, as the other ones. But he also works with Kojo Eshin and this Black Atlantic Afro-futurist approach also. It's a lot about bass, how bass affects our bodies. And of course we have different sounds that affects bodies and brains in different ways, but every person differently. So yeah, I think this is, and Afrofuturism is also interesting because of that, because it's about sound, and it's also about the social, a lot about the social. Also, maybe this is an explanation why the sounds are also so radical, because it's connected to a very hurtful and apocalyptic history also. For me, it's important to always think both together, but I'm sorry for the sound radicality being a bit short-handed this time, but this was our idea and we didn't know where the conversation would take us, so to say. But it would be really nice to get some input of you. What topics would you find important, or what did you think was left out here, or we should go into deeper? I mean, not only us two, but the community in general, so to say.
That's just what I wanted to add, that it's for me not only about the politics of the dance floor, this kind of other ways of relating to each other, but also to reclaim entertainment, basically to make alternative forms of entertainment for different goals than to make money. So this would be my equivalent to what you are describing.
If music has power, or if a festival has a power to collect 40,000 people, and they know there is a manifestation for an important topic just around the corner or in the next neighborhood, why not say, okay, let's all go there now and then come back? I don't know, there's certain power you can use, but of course, I mean, if we say music is not linked to ideology, I think that's an illusion. I mean, of course it always is.
I'm wondering what you think about the big parade at the G20 in Hamburg with 15,000 or so, organized by the hedonists.
Yeah, like I say, if this results in mobilization for a good thing, then I like it, definitely. Well, we have to wrap it up because in 20 minutes the next panel is going to start, and maybe you want to take a break. If you want to join the next panel as well from Reclaim Club Culture. Well, thank you all for coming. Super interesting, and I don't know, for me I still have lots of questions, so if we meet later on the dance floor or here, just approach us and let's discuss. I think the communication and discussion is always the starting point for something, so I hope we continue with this, and thank you for being here and sharing this with us.